Kountz taught himself to read a child determined to shape his own future against all odds. At 6 years old, he told his father, "I will become a doctor." Before 1961, kidney failure killed thousands yearly. His father believed him. Samuel Kountz would perform over 3,000 kidney transplants in his lifetime. In 1967, he transplanted a kidney that survived 14 years when doctors predicted weeks. That patient lived, and lived, and lived because Kountz refused to accept death as inevitable. The human body rejects foreign tissue as an invader. It attacks. It destroys. Yet surgeons persisted. Kidney transplants between identical twins sometimes survived. But identical twins are rare, and kidney disease does not wait. But what about two unrelated people? Could the body accept a stranger's organ? Nearly every expert said no. Kountz said yes. Born in Lexa, Arkansas, 1930 grandson of a sharecropper. No black high school existed nearby, so he traveled to find education. He earned an academic scholarship to Arkansas Agricultural, Mechanical, and Normal College. Then he applied to the University of Arkansas Medical Program in 1952. They rejected him. He applied again. They rejected him again. Kountz wrote a letter directly to the university president. He explained his qualifications point by point and asked them to name one academic reason for the denial. They could not. In 1952, Samuel Kountz became the first black student admitted to the University of Arkansas Graduate School. He did not walk through that door quietly. He walked through it with a plan already forming. From Arkansas, he went to San Francisco, to Stanford University, for surgical training. Stanford in the late 1950s was one of the few places in American medicine experimenting with transplant surgery, a procedure most doctors thought impossible, even reckless. His mentor there was Dr. Roy Cohn, one of the leading transplant researchers in the country. Kountz studied under Cohn with a focus that people around him noticed and described years later. He arrived before anyone else and stayed after everyone had gone. His hands in the operating room were precise, quiet, unhurried. A colleague later said watching Kountz suture was like watching someone write in cursive on a grain of rice. He was building toward a specific question. The question was whether immune rejection could be controlled well enough to save someone who had no twin. Here is what no one told you about the state of transplant medicine in 1960. The window for a viable kidney outside the body was 4 to 6 hours. Transplantation was local, improvised, and desperate. Kountz saw something different. He saw a system, a way to make this procedure controlled, repeatable, and scalable. But first, he had to prove it could work at all. Kountz is 30 years old, standing across the operating table from Dr. Roy Cohn. The patient is not related to the donor. This is the attempt that medicine has largely said cannot hold. Kountz makes the incision. He places the donor kidney into the recipient's lower abdomen. He sutures the vessels with the precision his colleagues had spent years describing. He releases the clamp. Blood flows into the kidney. It works. The graft commences functioning immediately. The patient's body does not immediately reject it. It holds. That morning, in that room, the barrier that had stopped transplant medicine for a decade cracked open. Kountz and Cohn had shown it was clinically possible to transplant a kidney between two unrelated humans. Kountz did not stop at one. By the late 1960s, he had performed hundreds of kidney transplants. He was still building toward the problem that caged the entire field. 4 to 6 hours. That was the limit. A kidney removed from a donor began to die almost immediately. Time constraints turned each procedure into a sprint. Kountz attacked this problem directly. From 1968 through 1972, he developed preservation methods that extended organ survival to 72 hours. 3 full days. Where the old window was measured in hours, his was measured in days. A kidney could now be removed, preserved, packed, and transported across the country. Doctors could search a national registry, finally pursuing the perfect match instead of settling for proximity. Transplantation went from improvised and local to scheduled and national. The system of organ transport that exists in the United States today grew from that window. By 1973, Kountz had completed over 500 kidney transplant operations. He ranked among the leading transplant surgeons in the world. And then everything changed. In 1972, Kountz accepted the chairmanship of surgery at Downstate Medical Center in Brooklyn. He was 42 years old, and his hands had saved more than 500 lives. The program he built at the University of California, San Francisco, had transplant survival rates that matched or exceeded any program in the world. That is not a boast from a colleague or a memorial plaque. That is what the clinical data showed. He arrived at Downstate with a list of plans and a schedule already forming. Then 1973 arrived. During a medical trip to South Africa, Kountz suffered a neurological event that left him severely impaired. The specific nature of that event has never been fully explained in the public record. He returned to the United States unable to practice surgery. He died in 1981, 8 years after that trip. He was 50 years old. Now here is where the story takes a specific turn. While Kountz was building his program at the University of California, San Francisco, another surgeon, was gaining international attention. In December 1967, a surgeon named Christian Barnard performed the world's first human heart transplant in Cape Town. The press coverage was global and immediate. Barnard appeared on magazine covers across Europe and the United States. Invitations to the White House and international diplomatic events followed. The name Barnard became synonymous with transplant surgery in the public mind. Here is what that coverage did not include. Kidney transplantation, Kountz's field since 1961, was saving exponentially more lives than heart transplants were. Early heart transplant recipients survived weeks, sometimes months. Kountz's kidney recipients were living years, going home, going back to work. The clinical record was not ambiguous about which procedure was more immediately useful to more patients. But heart surgery had the drama, and drama had the cameras. Kountz had the results, and results, in this case, did not have the cameras. Medical journalism documented Barnard's work thoroughly in the years that followed. Coverage of Kountz's program during the same period was a fraction of that volume. A surgeon who had performed more successful organ transplants than almost anyone alive received a fraction of the attention given to a man who had performed one. By the time Kountz chaired surgery at Downstate, the narrative of transplant medicine had already been written. Barnard's name was in it. Kountz's name was a footnote, when it appeared at all. Now consider how that narrative got written and who was doing the writing. Medical journals in the 1960s and 70s had editorial boards made up almost entirely of white men. Hospital press offices decided whose surgeries got press releases and whose did not. Science journalists chose which surgeons to call for quotes, and they called the names they already knew. Each of those choices reinforced the last one. A name not cited in one article was less likely to be cited in the next. A surgeon not profiled in one publication was less likely to be contacted by the next. The machinery did not require a meeting or a memo. American surgical conventions had no mechanism for centering black physicians as primary innovators. Kountz would present results at conferences, specific numbers, specific survival rates, specific procedural improvements. His data would be absorbed into the field, cited without attribution, or folded into papers with his name buried in a list. His colleagues noticed. Kountz noticed. He did not stop working. He saw what the numbers screamed before anyone else dared speak it aloud. Black Americans develop kidney failure at a rate roughly 3 times higher than white Americans. 3 times. In a country where Kountz spent years going to churches to tell black communities this surgery existed, he knew who needed this surgery most and who was least likely to be told it existed. So he went to them. He sought congregations, civic organizations, any gathering to reach people the system was failing. That work did not make the journals. It did not generate profiles. It left no citation trail for the next generation of researchers to follow. So it also disappeared. Here is the truth of how institutional memory works in medicine. What gets funded gets studied. What gets studied gets published. What gets published gets cited. What gets cited gets taught. His community outreach fit none of those categories. And who decided that a surgeon speaking to black churches about kidney disease was not worth documenting? Press offices made those decisions. They issued releases for surgeries they considered landmark events. Kountz's UCSF outcomes ranked among the best in the world. The press releases went to other programs. Not because the data was weaker, because the man holding it was black. That sentence is not an interpretation. It is the pattern the evidence shows when you line it up. The same journals that ran dozens of articles on Barnard ran a fraction of that on Kountz. Journalists seeking expert commentary on transplant surgery called Barnard's office, not Kountz's. Editorial leadership had already chosen their central figure. And they were right that he was not the center. They made him not the center. Each decision built on the last one until the omission looked like fact. His breakthrough transformed transplant surgery for millions who came after. Medical students who trained in the 1980s and 90s learned transplant history from curricula built on the citations of the 1970s. Those citations reflected the journalism of the 1960s. Journalism that had already pushed Kountz to the margins. By the time anyone thought to look back, the chain was 3 decades long. A student who never heard the name had no reason to ask why they had never heard it. Absence does not announce itself. The neurological illness that ended his surgical career also ended his ability to defend his own record. He had no platform left. The field had already moved on. His published papers remain, gathering dust on forgotten shelves. UCSF maintains the clinical records, the survival rates, the records his team produced. The evidence of what he built survived him. But records without institutional will to surface it is just paper in a drawer. In 2023, the United Network for Organ Sharing coordinated more than 46,000 transplants in the United States. That network depends on viable transport windows. Those windows rest on a foundation Kountz built. His name does not appear in the standard public history of the organization. The foundation is there. The name of the man who laid it is not. That gap between what was built and what was credited did not close on its own. It was maintained. Block by block, year by year. Today somewhere, a preserved kidney is traveling towards someone whose survival depends on that 3-day window. The story of Samuel Lee Kountz Jr. was never an accident of forgetting.